Hello, everybody. This is Cyrus with Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we talk about life after death, out-of-body experiences, astral projection, extraterrestrials, and all kinds of things like that. And tonight, I want to address some of the points that I make about other OBE authors, why I'm sometimes critical of them, and to hopefully clarify my positions a little bit. I also wanted to address something that's happening with Anthony Peake, the author. So a little announcement about that, which I'll have as well. So I am also making this video because I do receive angry emails, angry messages, and angry comments, or at least disagreeable comments. Sometimes angry, sometimes hate mail, but sometimes just friendly disagreements about some of my work in relation to the fact that in my books, sometimes on this channel and on my Facebook posts, I will sometimes disagree with very popular authors and some of their opinions. And I think some people are big fans of some of these guys, and so if I am poking at some of their theories, people will take this the wrong way and become sometimes very upset about this. And this is why I've had a surprising amount of people who have sent me emails or contacted me to express how much they dislike what I have to say. And to that, my general feeling is I don't care, because no one's going to tell me what I can and cannot talk about. But that being said, I also think that people jump the gun too much and make conclusions that are not necessarily accurate about how I really feel. Because really what's going on is that if I'm criticizing one element of somebody's work, I might in the next breath be praising and linking to their books. As an example, let's first begin with Jürgen Ziewe. So Jürgen's work includes Multidimensional Man and Vistas of Infinity, and I literally recommend those books over my own books. Multidimensional Man I read when I was first getting into out-of-body experiences, before I began having them, back about 2013. I should say when I was getting back into out-of-body experiences. And Multidimensional Man connected a lot of dots for me that I hadn't been able to connect before, and it may be that reading that book helped initiate all the new OBEs I began having, which helped lead me to where I am now, being able to write so much about the topic. I think maybe just the act of reading that book brought some of this to light in my subconscious mind and opened doors. Jürgen's books are great. I have disagreements with some of his conclusions about how reality is entirely internally based. So Jürgen believes that if you see a storm or an ugly insect walking across the ground, both situations are likely the result of somebody's internal thought patterns projecting this into the environment, as opposed to something that may naturally exist. So as I talked about in the video, one video back about the middle astral level, I don't believe that's true. I believe it's like a half-truth. So a little insect walking across the ground may very well be part of nature on that dimension, on that density level, whereas Jürgen would interpret anything like that as being internally based, something that's being projected out of somebody else's mind. So I don't necessarily agree with that point of view. So when I've had some friendly debates with Jürgen, like on the Facebook groups, usually we're debating something along those lines, but it doesn't mean I'm not a fan of Jürgen's work. Next is William Buhlman. So Buhlman was his work, Adventures Beyond the Body. This is one of the first books that I read when I was first introduced to topics like this when I was like 13 years old. So we're looking way back, like the year 2000. And it was actually Adventures Beyond the Body and The Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. And Buhlman, I thought his work was much more well written than Monroe's, and it really helped open my eyes to a lot of concepts. So I'd always been a Buhlman fan. I just said in later years I've disagreed with his concept of higher self now, which I can get into in another video, because I don't believe that we can just do a chant and reach an exalted level of consciousness that easily. It doesn't work like that. And I also disagree with the idea that we have to transcend the astral world altogether, because in Buhlman's words, he doesn't like dealing with his family. He doesn't want to meet his deceased family. So he's a little bit of like a misanthrope. With all due respect, like that's kind of how he comes across. But not everybody else is. You know, many of us have deceased loved ones we love and care about. So we're not going to implement a strategy like that, because if they're in the astral plane, or like the middle astral, which I talked about in the last video, then that's where we want to be, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, and doesn't make us inferior for thinking this way. I don't really buy some of these ideas of, like, quote, spiritual progression, that we all have to be trying to get to the highest level possible. And that's, again, a reoccurring theme with some of these authors. And it doesn't mean that they don't have the best intentions in mind, and it doesn't mean that they don't have tons of great information, but it's something that I have to take some issue with. Next is Tom Campbell. So Campbell's the one I'm most outspoken about. I really made this clear in my latest book, The Afterlife and Beyond, because, just to simplify a very complex subject, Campbell believes that when we encounter deceased loved ones in after-death states, after-death contacts, near-death experiences, because the soul belongs to this greater kind of computer matrix of the universe, it rejoins that and becomes incomprehensible to us. So therefore, all after-death experiences, after-death contacts must be some kind of a pre-programmed thing by this greater soul to comfort us or something like that. So he thinks after-death contacts are illusions. Now, maybe these positions have changed. Maybe he's written other things that have contradicted this. Maybe he doesn't 100% believe this. I'm just going off of the lectures I've listened to on YouTube. I haven't read Campbell's work in a long time. I read My Big Toe a long time ago. It didn't quite resonate with me, but I did like the book. And he wasn't quite saying things of this quite like this back then. So, I'm not saying that Campbell completely dismisses people who have after-death contacts, but the way he's presented this information would lead somebody to believe that is the case, and that when somebody is encountering their deceased loved one, I've had many people come to me upset after hearing Campbell's lectures and believing then that, their visit with their son or daughter who crossed over, it was a hologram or an illusion. And Campbell is only thinking this way because, in my opinion, he's thinking in this completely linear, three-dimensional way. Because, multidimensionally speaking, we could have a part of us, that part of the oversoul, the source consciousness, and we can also have a part of us that's the individual. We can have it both. And Campbell just hasn't quite figured this out yet. And I'd be happy to debate the subject with him. Okay, finally, this leads to Anthony Peake. So this is the newer guy who I made a video about a few videos back, and he believes that when we die, we have to relive our same life over and over again like Groundhog's Day. And he does have quite a few people who support this theory. In my video, I called it out as being ridiculous, and I said he was off his rocker. And yes, I should have said his idea was off his rocker. I'm not off the rocker. I shouldn't be in the business of personally insulting somebody, but I will say that an idea that is this destructive has the potential to pull the theorist down with it. Kind of like people I've known who believed they were the only ones who existed. So this is like hardcore solipsism, when people think that they're the only one who exists. And I saw that theory pull a friend of mine in college down into an extreme state of paranoia. Because not only did he thought he was the only one who existed, and he also believed Peake's idea of having to relive the same life over and over again. And this was basically the result of taking a lot of hallucinogens and having bad trips and attempting to make models of the universe around like bad. I don't know what he was taking, probably mushrooms, like bad mushrooms, bad hallucinogenic trips. So Anthony Peake seems to believe this based on a lot of quantum theory. So I have called it out because a lot of people brought this work to my attention, and I just don't agree with it. Peake contacted me, and he has challenged me to a debate. This is on March 24th on his format, which is his podcast. And so I did accept. So this will be March 24th. And with Peake, when he contacted me, basically his main argument against what I was saying was that I'm a nobody. He said, look at your audience. Your YouTube video is only getting a couple hundred hits. Who are you? I look at me. I belong to International Association of Near-Death Studies, Society for Psychical Research. I have this big name author. Let me guess, you're a self-published author, and on, just berating me with this idea that I'm a nobody, so I have no right to dare question what he has to say. And to me, this was a very narcissistic way to handle the situation, and I certainly hope that Mr. Peake will have developed his way of debating his point of view by the time we are discussing this on his show, because, in my opinion, it doesn't matter how small I am, that's not an excuse to prove somebody's point as being incorrect. It doesn't matter if I have no books. It doesn't matter if this channel with like almost 500 subscribers has like 2 subscribers and my Facebook page has 55 people on it. That doesn't matter. What matters is the arguments and the points that are addressed. So you can't say, well, I have a bigger audience and I'm more important than you, therefore you are irrelevant. That is not the way to conduct oneself in this kind of debate. That said, his argument that I'm insignificant because I'm a self-published author is really quite silly, because I actually have a publishing company. So in this company, we have close to 100 books out there. Quite a bunch of those were written by myself, and most of them were not. And I have people who work for me in India, Philippines, and a couple other countries, and Understanding Life After Death is found a lot in bookshelves like Barnes & Noble, and I think I do have a pretty good audience at this point who follow my work. So, it doesn't really make any sense to say, well, you're a self-publisher, so what do you know? My disagreement with Peake's work is that every single subject that relates to after-death contact, whether it's out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences or physical mediumship or reincarnation research by people like Ian Stevenson, even the life between lives stuff, the Michael Newton stuff, which, I'm not as into that stuff, but I'm going to include it on the list. So many areas of evidence would refute this premise. And if I debate with him, it's going to be the same as debating with a materialist skeptic and somebody who's so fixated into their idea that they're not going to look at the objective evidence, and they'll have excuses for all of it. So I attempted to bring up with Peake about the concept of mediumship, and that there's mediums who are highly tested and highly verifiable, who are in contact with the other side, and then they can tell us that it's not the case. It's not Groundhog's Day. We don't have to keep living our same life over and over again. And Peake's response was, oh, look at Helen Duncan. She was caught out as a fraud. You expect me to believe mediums. That's the biggest logical fallacy I've ever heard. Helen Duncan was one medium with whom I do not reference Helen Duncan in any of my books. Helen Duncan, an argument can be made in her favor because the photo where she was caught out as a fraud, with like this big dummy-looking thing that was supposed to be her revealing that her physical mediumship was using a big puppet. Well, apparently she had been asked to construct like a big puppet as a way of demonstrating what a physical mediumship session is like. So that was never intended to be what it was misrepresented as. So it was kind of like a smear job. But I don't have the full story about that. That's a whole different subject. The point is that was his argument against that. So if that's the best Peake can come up with, then it's going to be a very interesting debate. If all he can do is say, "Oh, Helen Duncan was a fraud," and you're not a credible person. So all that being said, yes, I'm being very harsh to Peake based on not only his behavior but his work. But I'm at the moment reading his first book, which is called "Is There Life After Death?" I believe that's the name of it. And I'm a little bit that title of the book frustrates me, because if you ask that question based on the answer of his interpretation, the answer is no, because living your same life over and over again is not life after death. That's called a nightmare. It's called being stuck into a nightmare. So I hate to see the topic of life after death being extrapolated with this toxic idea. That said, I'm reading Mr. Peake's book, and I find the book to be well written, and as somebody who edits books, I appreciate that. I find it to be an interesting book, and it's an interesting theory, and it would be fun to explore that theory, especially with somebody who doesn't take it literally as like food for thought. But literally believing these things, I can't imagine subscribing to such a dangerous metaphysical theory, which, for one thing, I mean, it's worse than extinction. It's worse than materialist atheism, because I would rather not exist and then, exist again as some random form in the universe, which is basically what materialist atheists believe, as opposed to having to be in a hell of just living the same life again and again and again. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much. So I'm happy to debate the guy on his show. I'm happy to hopefully change a few minds of people listening, so that they don't feel like this is their destiny after they cross over. But but I do my thing, and I'm growing my audience, and I'm developing this channel, and my books have increased by 2 or 3 times of sales in the last few months. So I'm hoping I'm spreading more knowledge about life after death, and most importantly, I'm hoping I'm helping more grieving people, because that's what I care about. I care about helping people who are grieving. So that's why, at the end of the day, I'm critical about some of these people, because I don't like unfounded theories that cause people grief and distress. Because people have these lovely, beautiful experiences meeting their deceased loved ones, like in after-death contacts and things like that. And then some of these theories come along, basically like people coming along with big hammers to whack those theories back down into the ground, to whack those experiences back down into the ground, and to basically talk about how it's invalid. And there's no reason to assume that after-death contact is invalid because somebody else has some idea that contradicts it. And so that's why I'm critical sometimes of some of the popular authors. But with most of them, it doesn't mean I have anything against them. And most of them, I recommend their work. I recommend Zui, who again is a kind of like a hero of mine. I recommend Bullman's work. I recommend Campbell's earlier work, especially as a really interesting way of looking at the universe, especially if you're more of a left brain engineer type person. Peake, well, I haven't finished reading the book, but spoiler alert, I probably won't recommend his book to anybody, but that's just because I find his theory to be dissatisfying. But I also understand that he's put a lot of investment into that theory, and it means a lot to him, and I hope that I can present some counter arguments to that, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. And yeah, I know I'm still stepping on toes. Some people don't like what I have to say, but that's not going to slow me down. It's not going to stop me from doing the work I do. And sometimes, you have to debate subjects. I don't believe in just laying down and not engaging people, not engaging topics. I do think that healthy debate is really important for helping society as a whole come into greater understandings about these subjects. And with this channel and with my work, we can probably expect continued debate. The debates are not going to stop. It's going to keep going. And I think it's important just to separate sometimes the material as well from the person, and don't let it affect you personally. That's it for this video. You can check out my stuff, check out the group, check out my books if you like that kind of thing, and I'll see you next time.